let's pick up where we left off last week at Chapter 4, Davriel. Davriel Kane, the man of the manor, was growing very tired of people trying to murder him. What was the point of moving to a far-off backwater if people were just going to bother you anyway? Davriel had made reaching him extremely difficult, but these self-righteous questing types seemed to consider it an extra challenge. "You will not have these worries once you use me," the entity said from the back of Davriel's mind. It had a silky, inviting voice. "Once we are confident in our power, no simple adventurer will ever think to challenge us." Davriel ignored the voice. Chatting with the entity was rarely productive. So long as it healed him from his wounds, Davriel didn't care what promises it whispered. He settled back in his seat as Crunchnar arrived. What a silly name. The tall, horned creature would, to any normal person, have simply been a demon. That, of course, was far too pedestrian a term. Diabolist connoisseurs knew that demons came in hundreds of strains, and one never properly used the term breed or bloodline for demons, as they were normally created fully formed from magic rather than being born. Crunchnar, for example, was a Heartmurt demon, a strain of tall, muscular demons with no hair, inhuman features, and horns that swept back along the head, almost like a mane. A rare, wingless strain, Heartmurts were hardy, quick to heal, and tended to be skilled combatants. Indeed, Crunchnar wore warrior's leathers and bore a pair of wicked swords strapped to his waist. Scroll down a bit more. The demon was dumb as a stump. Fortunately, he was as sturdy as one, too. At some instructions from Miss Highwater, Crunchnar squeezed into the washroom and picked up the little assassin girl, then carried her out into the bedroom. He took the viol off her back, then placed her in a chair opposite Davriel. The demon frowned as the girl's stiff, frozen shape didn't conform to the seat. Miss Highwater was correct. This girl was different from the other would-be heroes who came to kill Davriel. Oh no, is there an echo? Shit. Is that better? I was afraid of an echo. Okay, so that's better? Okay. Then it's the micro... Yes. Okay. My apologies, I'm still not entirely used to messing around with the Creator Studio, so my apologies. Alright, back to Children of the Nameless. Where were we? Miss Highwater was correct. This girl was different from the other would-be heroes who came to kill Davriel. She was so young, 14, 15 at most. Had the church run out of able-bodied adults to send to their deaths? Instead of the usual gear of spiky weapons and too many buckles, the child wore peasant clothing, tattered, bloodied, ashen. She looked half-starved, with deep dark circles around her eyes. Under her eyes. Oops. Miss Highwater stepped up beside him, cocking an eyebrow as Crunchnar tried to force the girl to sit down, which Davriel's biting spell still prevented. The demon then grumbled to himself, doing his best to tie her into the seat. Scroll down. Davriel clapped, summoning a small, red-skinned devil from the serving room. It trotted in, carrying a tray that was too big for it, set precariously with a bottle of fine Gluzar, a local vintage. The sweetly aromatic wine tickled Davriel's nose as he poured himself a cup. The creature jabbered at him in the clipped local devil tongue. "No," Davriel said in reply, sipping the wine. "Not yet." The creature snarled in annoyance, then held up a much smaller cup, which Davriel filled with wine. The devil wobbled off, carrying the tray while trying to drink its wine. It had better not drop that Glurzer. Devils made terrible servants, but one worked with what one had. At least they were cheap and easy to fool. "You will have so much more," the entity whispered in the back of his mind, "once you seize it." Crunchnar finally stepped back, folding oversized arms. There, done. He'd tied the girl by her waist, feet and neck to the chair, though she was still stiff as a board, and so rested against the seat at an angle. "Good enough," Davriel said, "though you should probably stay here when I release the binding, just in case." "You fear such a tiny thing?" Crunchnar snarled. "Tiny things can still be very dangerous, Crunchnar," Davriel said. "A knife, for example." "Or your brain, Crunchnar," Miss Highwater noted. Scroll down. Crunchnar folded his arms, glaring at her. "You think to insult me, but I know that deep inside, you truly fear me." "Oh, trust me, Crunchnar," she said. "You'll find there's nothing I fear more than stupidity." He stalked forward, feet thumping on the floor. He drew up close to Miss Highwater, looming over her. "I will destroy you once I have claimed his soul. You grow weak and lazy like him. Ledgers and figures? Bah. When was the last time you claimed a soul of a man?" "I tried to claim yours the other night," she snapped, "but I found only the soul of a mouse, which I should have anticipated, considering—" "Enough," Davriel said. "Both of you." They shared glares, but stilled. Davriel laced his fingers before himself, studying the peasant girl. She had stopped singing, but that tune, it had an odd strength to it, a power he hadn't expected. Was that the bonk's touch on her? She was undoubtedly from the approaches, likely Varlesian. He cancelled the binding. The young woman immediately relaxed in her seat, gasping. Then she wrapped her arms around herself and shivered, as if cold. Binding wards often had that effect. Her long brown hair covered much of her face as she glared at him. Crunchnar's ropes, now slack, didn't do much. They tied her feet to the chair, but didn't prevent her from moving her arms or head. "Be on with it, monster," the girl hissed at him. "Do not play with me. Kill me." "Do you have a preference?" Davriel said. "Axe to the neck? Cooked in the ovens? Devils have been suggested, but I'm worried you're too lean to provide proper nutrition." "You mock me. I'm merely frustrated," he said, pushing up out of his chair to begin pacing. "What is wrong with you villagers? Isn't your life terrible enough already with those spirits and beasts and whatnot out in the forests? Do you have to come up here and incite my wrath as well?" The girl huddled down in her chair. "All I want," Davriel said, "is to be left alone. All you need to do is your job. See that I'm provided with tea. And shirts, Miss Highwater said, going down her ledger. And food, and occasional taxes, and furniture, and rugs. And, well, yes, Davriel said, some few offerings befitting my station, but it's not that bad. A relationship equally beneficial to everyone involved. I get a quiet, secluded place to go about my life. You get a lord who doesn't drink your blood or feast on the flesh of virgins at every full moon. I would think that on Innistrad, having a lord who mostly ignores you would be quite the novelty. So what did Varlazen Village do to offend you? The girl whispered. Were your socks made too tight? Did one of the apples have a worm? What insignificant offense caused you to finally notice us? Bah, Davriel said, still pacing. I don't care about you. Yet you keep sending these hunters to come attack me. How many in the last 2 weeks, Miss Highwater? 4? 4 groups, she said, flipping a page in the ledger, with an average of 3 Cathars or hunters in each one. Popping out of my cellar, Davriel said, waving in annoyance, or breaking down my front door. Those twins with the tridents smashing my dining room window. The one made of antique stained glass. Someone keeps telling them of me, and so they keep coming to slay me. It's growing severely inconvenient. What can I do to get you villagers to shut up? That should not be a problem, the girl whispered, now that you have murdered us all. Yes, well, that's not... He trailed off, stopping in place. Wait, murdered us all? Why feign ignorance? The girl said. We all know what you've done. You were spotted when you took my parents from their wagon 10 days ago. Then your geists took those merchants and others who strayed too close to the edge of the village. My sister 2 days ago, and then today... She closed her eyes. They're all gone, she whispered. All but me, dead and cold with marble eyes. I held my sister after they found her, and she was limp, like a sack of grain from the cellar. She was apprenticing to be a priest, but she died like the rest. The bog will have the bodies of my people, but it will not feast, for their souls are gone, taken like the heat stolen straight from the fire, leaving only ash. Scroll down. Davriel looked toward Miss Highwater, who cocked her head. All of them? Miss Highwater said, as in, everyone in Varlazen Village. The girl nodded. Varlazen, Davriel asked. Is that the one where you get your dust willow tea? Miss Highwater asked. Yes. Blast. The tea, a mild sedative, was his favorite. He needed it to sleep on days when memories grew too weighty for him. It's also where the shirt tailors live, Miss Highwater said. Lived. I guess we're anticipating that problem then. Every villager, Davriel said, spitting on the girl. Every one of them? She nodded. Hellfire, he said. Do you know how long it takes to replace those things? 16 years at least before they're productive. You do have 2 more villages, Miss Highwater noted, so I suppose it could be worse. Varlazen was my favorite. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference if your life depended on it, but this is going to have a serious impact on your income, and the next season's profits and loss ledgers. She made a note. Also, we're out of tea. Disaster, Davriel said, slumping back into his chair. Girl, it has been 10 days since the first of these deaths. She nodded slowly. My parents, you knew them. They made your shirts, but you already know of their deaths. You killed them. Of course I didn't, he said. Murdering villagers? Myself? That sounds like an awful lot of work. I have people, well, beings that are vaguely shaped like people, to do that sort of thing for me. Scroll down. Davriel rubbed his forehead. No wonder the hunters had been bothering him so much lately. Nothing hooked would-be heroes more than news of a mysterious lord abusing his peasants. Hellfire. He was supposed to have been able to fade away into obscurity here. He'd moved to Innistrad years ago, then finally settled on the approaches as the most remote location on an already remote plane. Here, consorting with demons was seen as only a minor oddity. So he'd thought. What if news of this spread to the wrong ears? The ones listening for stories about a man with his description, a man who could steal spells from the minds of others. Time grows short, the entity said in the back of his mind. They will find you, and they will destroy you. We must gather our power and prepare. I will be fine, Davriel countered, thinking directly to the entity. I don't need you. A lie, it replied. I can read your thoughts. You know that someday you will need me again. For a moment, Davriel smelled smoke, heard screams. For a moment he stood before cowering masses and was worshipped. These memories were somehow more real than they should be. The entity could play with his senses, but he asserted his will and forced away its touch, banishing the sensations. Miss Highwater, he said. Yes? Do we still have the soul of that knight who attacked me a few days ago? The one from whom I stole that binding I used on the girl? You promised to give the knight's soul to the devils, she said, flipping a few pages in her ledger. If they were good. Have they been good? They're devils. Of course they haven't been good. Right then, fetch the soul for me. Oh, and a head, if we've got one lying around. Let's see. Chapter 5. Takanda. Takanda tested her bonds. They were slack, and she thought she could even get out of the ones wrapping her feet. But dared she run? What would that accomplish? Once Miss Highwater returned from giving orders outside the room, the man asked her if Varlesen village was the one with that angry man who smelled of dishwater. That might have meant Mayor Gertlin of Hermig's Bridge. In any case, this Davriel pretended to be completely unaware of what had happened to her people, her family, her entire world. What was the purpose of this subterfuge? Who knows what strange machinations inhabit the brain of such a creature, she thought. Perhaps he just wants to torture me with uncertainty. She wiggled one foot, slipping it free of her ropes. Should she try attacking again? Foolishness. She obviously couldn't harm Davriel with something as simple as an ice pick. Maybe she should try the warding song. She decided to wait. Soon, another demon entered the bedroom, about her height. It was twisted and hunched over, and had features that vaguely reminded her of a hairless dog's snout. Unlike the other two, it had black wings jutting out of its back, though they were gnarled and withered. The demon slunk over to Davriel, carrying a bag in one hand, a cloth-wrapped object in the other. I'll try it. There we go. I'm gonna grab a sip of water quick. Sippy. Scroll down. Finally, Davriel said, rising and pulling over a small end table. Right here, Brerig. The hunched-over demon set the object on the table, and the cloth slipped off it, revealing a large, squat mason jar with a glowing light pulsing inside. "Excellent," Davriel said. "Riddle, master?" the demon, Brerig, asked, smiling a wide mouth full of too many teeth. "Fine. Was it a farmer?" "Nope, afraid not." "Ah, oh well." Brerig sighed and pulled something from the sack, a human man's head held by the hair. Takanda immediately felt sick. The head was preserved with some kind of metal plate on the bottom. The skin was pale and bloodless, but not rotting. She tasted bile, but forced herself to swallow and breathe deeply. Just another corpse. She'd seen too many of those already today. Davriel took the head and screwed it onto the glowing glass jar, affixing the two. Brerig shuffled over to the wall, where he shooed away a few of the red-skinned devils. Miss Highwater inspected the jar, her ledger under her arm, while Crunchnar stood near the doorway and slid a knife from his belt, eyeing Takanda. Scroll down. Davriel fiddled with the jar, flipping something on the top while muttering something that sounded like an incantation. Then, when he set it down, the light from the jar faded, and the head on top quivered. The lip began moving, eyes lethargically opening and looking one way, then the next. "You're a stitcher?" Takanda asked. "Do not insult me, young woman," Davriel said. "A ghoul caller, then? A necromancer?" Davriel stood up and spun, pointing toward her. "I've been patient with you so far. Do not test me." Takanda shrank back into the chair. Stabbing him had only seemed to annoy him, but this he actually found insulting. "I am a diabolist," Davriel said. "A demonologist, a scholar. My study takes skill, effort, and acumen. Necromancy is a fool's art, practiced by failed butchers who think they're being clever just because they, brilliantly, noticed that sometimes corpses don't stay dead." He snapped his fingers in front of the head's eyes, drawing its attention. He moved his finger back and forth, and the eye tracked it. "Have you ever taken note of the type of people who end up practicing necromancy?" Davriel continued. "The art attracts the unhinged, the unintelligent, and the unkempt. Far too many of them have overinflated opinions of their own wicked schemes, believing that they're rebellious and self-empowered simply because they've trained themselves to look at a dead body without getting sick. Never mind that corpses make for terrible servants. The upfront work is a nightmare, and then the maintenance, the stench, all for a servant who is even dumber than Crunchnar." Crunchnar growled softly at that. Takanda slipped her other foot free. Davriel wasn't watching. He was using a syringe from the bag to inject the head with some kind of green liquid. "But," Takanda couldn't help saying, "you are working with a corpse right now." "This," Davriel said, "this is barely even magic. This is merely a means to an end." He finished the injection, and the head focused on him more deliberately, then parted its lips. "Do you remember your name?" Davriel asked the head. "Jagreth," the head said, its lips moving, though the sound seemed to come from the metal plate that connected it to the jar. Yeah, Ludovic called out, and Liliana, and all the others. "Jagreth of Thraben," Miss Highwater said, reading from her ledger. "Cathar, official church warrior and self-styled hunter of evil. He had quite the reputation for honor by my sources." I met him, Takanda realized. It wasn't his head, but this man, this soul, had come through Varlazen a few days ago, after hearing of her parents' deaths. His voice had been deep and confident. She'd imagined him as a tall, broad-chested man. Willia had been quite taken with him. That had been before she'd... I came to kill you, the head said, fixing its gaze on Davriel. Man of the manor, what have you done to me? Just a few improvements, Davriel said. How does it feel? Cold, the corpse whispered, as if my soul has been frozen in the highest mountain ice, then locked in a darkness so deep even the sun would be swallowed there. Perfect, Davriel said. That's the preservation liquid doing its work. He tapped the head lightly on the cheek. Thank you for the binding spell you let me leech from your brain. It proved helpful not half an hour ago. You monster, the head whispered. What you have done to me is an abomination, a moral injustice. Technically, Davriel said, I'm the legal authority in this region, and you did try to murder me in my sleep, so I'd say that what I've done to you is both moral and just. But let's make a deal. Answer a few questions for me, and I'll promise to let your spirit go. I am not going to help you bring terror and pain to any other's fiend. But look at the poor girl in that chair, Davriel said, gesturing toward Takanda. Her entire village has been killed, their souls stolen from their bodies in the night by some mysterious terror. It was during the day, Takanda whispered, and it's not mysterious. You know what happened. You did it. The head fixated on her, and the features softened to sympathetic. Ah, child, the head with the voice of Jagrath, the Cathar, said to her. I tried and I failed. It is as I feared then. A monster like this one is rarely sated with a few murders. Once he has the thirst for blood, he returns again and again. Takanda shivered. I do get quite thirsty, Davriel said. Usually I opt for a nice red wine, but after an extremely hard day, nothing hits the spot like a cup filled with the warm blood of an innocent. The head's eyes turned, looking up at him. I bathe in it, you know, Davriel said, just like the stories say. Never mind how impractical that sounds, the clotting, the staining. Really, just go with it. But blast, you all keep finding out about my nefarious nocturnal negations. What I need to know is how. How did you find me out? Those at the Priory told me what you had been doing, Jagrath said. They explained about the souls you've taken. Who at the Priory? Davriel said. The Prioress herself. This made Davriel harden for some reason, his lips drawing to a line. Everyone knows what you've been up to, Jagrath said. You left the bodies, the souls removed. But how did you know it was me? Davriel asked. I'm not native to the locale, but even my few years here have taught me that you don't lack for threats upon human lives. Why assume I was behind it? I have already told you. 1 second. Scroll down. My sister saw you, Takanda said, drawing both of their attention. She watched as you took my parents 10 days ago. After that, when you took the souls of those merchants traveling between villages, a priest saw you. Then you claimed Willia in the fields, likely angry she'd escaped you before. You cannot pretend innocence here, monster, Jagrath said. You are distinctive in your cloak and mask. My cloak and mask, Davriel said. The ones you wear when visiting the village, Takanda said. My sister saw you clearly. She saw someone in my cloak and mask, Davriel said. "The cloak and mask I specifically wear to obfuscate my features so that my real self is unrecognizable. Nobody saw my face, correct?" Well, technically, the mask and cloak were what Willia had said she'd seen, but everyone knew the man of the manor was a malevolent figure who consorted with demons. Everyone knew that. She looked again at Davriel, with his fluffy shirt, thin mustache, and violet cravat, with his strange mix of arcane knowledge and remarkable obliviousness. "Hellfire," he muttered. "Someone's been imitating me." "A difficult task," Miss Highwater said. "Think of the sheer number of naps they'd have to take." Davriel eyed her. "Admit it, Dav," she said. "It would require a true master of imitation to impersonate you. Most people would accidentally do something relevant or useful, and that would destroy the entire illusion." "Go check for my cloak and mask," he said. "Release me," the head said. "I have answered your questions." "I did not specify a date or time," Davriel said. "I only said that I would release you. And I will. Eventually. Technicalities. As far as I'm concerned, technicalities are all that matter. But..." Davriel twisted something on the jar's top, and the head went slack, jaw drooping, eyes rolling to the side. The jar underneath filled again with glowing light. Miss Highwater ruffled through a wardrobe on the side of the room. She pulled out a deep black cloak with a distinctive, ghostly tattered bottom, like the frayed spirit of a haunting geist. The golden mask was in a demonic shape, with large dark eyes, sinuous lines, and a gruesome mouth reminiscent of a jaw with the skin removed. It what the man wore when he went out in public. What the man wore when he went in public. Damn it. "Well," she said, "your outfit is still here, so the imitator fashioned their own copy." "But why?" Takanda asked. "What reason would someone have to imitate you?" "Miss Highwater," Davriel said, "how many times did you say I've been assaulted in the last few weeks?" "4," she said. "5 if you count the girl, I suppose." Davriel threw himself into his chair, rubbing his forehead. What a pain. Someone is having fun out there, then pinning the blame on me. How am I supposed to get any work done? "Work?" Miss Highwater asked. "What work?" "Mostly reminding you to do things," he said. "I don't want you slacking. I wrote myself a note about it the other day." He patted his pocket, then reached over to his suit coat and removed a piece of paper, which was bloodied from his stab wound. He gave Takanda a flat stare. "You really didn't do it, did you?" Takanda asked. "You didn't kill my village." "Hellfire, no. Why would I ruin the village that provides my tea? Even if your harvest has been late this year." He glared at Takanda. "We've been busy," she said, "being murdered." "What a mess," Davriel said. "I can't have someone imitating me. Miss Highwater, send Crunchnard and, say, Verminal to look into who might have done this, and see if we can get more peasants. Maybe promise no whippings for the first 2 years. See if that attracts any settlers." "You're going to send the demons?" Takanda asked. "You're not even going to go yourself?" "Too busy," he said. "He has to take his evening nap," Miss Highwater said. "Then a nightcap, then sleep, then his morning nap." Takanda gaped at Davriel, who leaned back in his chair. Perhaps he hadn't killed the people of her village, but someone had been leading the Whisperers when they attacked. She heard their footsteps, and someone had been seen wearing Davriel's cloak and mask. The murderer, and the geists that served them, was still at large. Varlazen wasn't the only village in the region. There were 2 more, along with the people of the priory. hundreds more souls were in danger, and Davriel wasn't even going to leave his manor? Takanda felt her anger rising again. Maybe this man hadn't killed her friends and family himself, but his incompetent and selfish rule shared equal blame for the deaths. Takanda stood up, pulling herself from her ropes. Crunchnar, who had been watching for this, stepped in front of the doorway to cut off her escape, but Takanda didn't try to flee. She leaped forward and snatched up the glowing jar off the table near Davriel, then, without a second thought, smashed it against the floor, breaking it and causing the head to roll away. The brilliant light of the soul inside seeped free, and she heard a distinctive sigh as the imprisoned Cathar escaped his torment. The light floated up, forming vaguely into the shape of a man, just as she'd imagined him, with that square jaw and that noble air, swathed in the rugged coat of a hunter. Admittedly, the collar was a little much. Thank you. A voice, as if blown by the wind, moved through the room. Hello. Davriel watched with an expression she couldn't read. Surprise? Horror at what she'd done to his prize? Technicalities or not, she said, you should make good on your word. I'm sure a true necromancer would know to thank It's such a weird one. Takanda hesitated, then turned toward the spirit, which, instead of dissipating as she'd assumed, was growing brighter. Its eyes grew larger as they darkened to pits, distorting the face. Its fingers stretched longer, and it adopted a wicked, lopsided grin. Cathar Jagrith? She asked. The thing struck, slashing razor-sharp fingers through her forearm, causing her not to bleed, but to feel an intense, frozen pain. She gasped and stumbled back. The thing, gone mad, lunged for Davriel. Obviously it's Krovo Atano impersonating Davriel. I have no idea who that is. Let's see. Crunchnar arrived first. The oversized demon blocked the spirit, touching it as if it were physical, and slammed it backward. The spirit let out an angry wail that made Takanda's ears hurt, and she clamped her hands on them, crying out. The spirit seemed to be able to decide whether it was physical or not, for though Crunchnar could touch it at first, the spirit faded and flowed away like fluttering curtains. It kept repeating a bastardized version of thank you over and over again, each somehow more wrong than the one before. Oh yeah, Corvo. Yeah. I think I've played Dishonored all of maybe one time, back when it came out. Don't remember much about it, except for the fact that you can throw wires at people and it murders them, so that's fun. The spirit flowed toward Davriel, darkening and becoming less transparent. Crunchnar whipped a sword from its sheath, and the weapon's faint glow of power made the spirit hesitate. Then Davriel, red smoke filling his eyes and turning them crimson, stood and released a jet of flame from his hands, the heat so intense that Takanda screamed. The spirit screeched in kind from the center of the immolation, then pulled in on itself, shriveling before burning away. It left a singed and blackened scar on the rug and the bookcase behind. Takanda gawked, cradling her arm, which still felt icy where she'd been slashed. The red smoke faded from Davriel's eyes. He winced, as if using the magic had caused him pain. He rubbed his temples, then shook his head. Well, that was exciting. Thank you, Crunchnar, for the timely intervention. I will have your soul, Diabolist, Crunchnar snapped. I have not forgotten our terms. Yeah, not the rug. Everything in Davriel's house costs a lot. Davriel stepped over and kicked at the burning rug. Did the rug makers live in your village? Master Gritish and her family, Takanda said. Yes. Damn, Davriel said. I'll have you know, girl, that I leached that fire spell from the mind of a particularly dangerous pyromancer. I'd been saving it for an emergency. The Cathar, Takanda blinked. He attacked me. Loose spirits, geists as you call them, can be dangerous and unpredictable. Most forget themselves when separated from their bodies, retaining only the faintest hints of memory. What you did was both foolish and reckless. I'm sorry. She looked away from the scarred rug, tucking her arm against her chest. Great. Glad to hear it. Oop. Davriel nodded his head toward her. Miss Highwater, see what the girl can tell you about this impostor. Then toss her out into the forest. Tell the devils they can have her if she tries to sneak in again. You're not going to check her mind for talents you can leech, Miss Highwater said. The bog stench is all over her, Davriel said. No, thank you. I have enough headaches at the moment. One of the demons, the hunched-over one they'd called Brerig, took Takanda by the arm and began to lead her from the room. His skin was surprisingly soft. Takanda resisted, trying to pull out of the demon's grip. Wait, she said. My viol. Behind them, a devil was plucking at the instrument. Davriel waved with an offhand gesture, so the devil scrambled over and delivered him the viol. Takanda said. Please, it is all I have left. It's a fine instrument, Davriel said. Might sell for enough to buy a new rug. But cooperate with Miss Highwater. Tell her everything you know of this impostor, and I'll let you keep it. Did you see this cloak and mask yourself? No, Takanda said, deflating. I am blind during the days. The bog's blessings has also left me cursed, payment for the song it gives. Davriel sighed, then made a shooing motion. I sure do love my neighbors. Brerig towed Takanda by the arm toward the doorway. Come, the demon said. Come. Come and I will tell you a riddle. They are fun. Come. She resisted a moment longer, then, as Miss Highwater joined them, finally relented to Brerig's surprisingly gentle prodding. What was her fate now? She had escaped death 3 times over tonight. The Whisperers, the Bog, the man in the manor. You didn't see the impostor, Miss Highwater said, a dark pen poised above her ledger as she walked. What did you see? Just bodies, Takanda said. So many bodies. I should live among them. I belong in a grave. Did they lose the color from their skin? Davriel asked from his seat, still toying with her viol. After they were taken, did they go pale or ashen? Takanda paused beside the doorway, and the demons didn't force her to continue. They looked just like they did in life, Takanda said back to him, only blue around their lips. The limbs went rigid, and they stayed stiff for a few hours, strangely stiff, before finally going limp. Sippy time. Water. Of course. Suspended animation following a direct soul siphon, Davriel said absently, probably the result of some aspiring necromancer harvesting souls. Well, it could be worse. If Miss Highwater can find the souls, I suppose we could restore them before the bodies rot. Then I wouldn't have to mail order a new village. Takanda felt a jolt go through her. Had he just said, "Restore them?" Takanda asked. "As in bring them back to life?" "Possibly," he said. "I'd have to see the bodies to be certain. But from the description, this state might be reversible. And that would certainly be easier than growing new peasants the traditional way." Though admittedly not as much fun, Miss Highwater noted. Come, let's stop bothering Lord Kane. Scroll down. The demon Brerig pulled Takanda's arm, but something deep within her, something that she had assumed shriveled and lifeless, stirred. Bring them back. She could bring them back? How long, she said. How long do we have? Are you still here? Davriel asked. How long? Crunchnar stepped forward, pushing aside Miss Highwater, sword out and leveled toward Takanda. So Takanda began singing. Though she intended to start small, that hope, that warmth exploded from her in a pure, solitary, forceful note. Like the peal of a morning bell, it was the first note of the warding song. The demons and devils in the room cried out in pain, a sharp and garish harmony. Brerig whimpered, and Miss Highwater backed away, hands to her ears. Even Crunchnar, 7 feet tall with terrible horns, stumbled and wavered. The devils scattered with collective screams of agony. Her viol, still in Davriel's hands, played the same note, a demanding, relentless tone. Davriel let go of the instrument, then cocked his head as it hovered in front of him. That happened sometimes. Her drums had done the same. She continued the song, each note louder than the one before. The 3 demons cowered down, groaning in agony, holding their heads. Davriel, however, just pushed the floating instrument aside with one finger, then stood up with a deliberate motion. The song didn't affect Davriel. He really was human. As with many protective magics, people were immune. Davriel strode up to Takanda, who let her song die off. Her viol floated down to the ground before Davriel's chair, and the 3 demons slumped to the floor. The cries of the devils still echoed in the other room. The Bog's Ward, Davriel said. A nice demonstration. Whatever took the people of your village was obviously frightened of you, which is why you're still alive. How long? She asked. How long will my people last? If I could find their souls... Depends, Davriel said. Most violent soul harvesting leaves the subject dead immediately, often with physical wounds, exploding chests and all that drama. But what you described sounds more like the aftermath of involuntary projection, where the soul is coaxed away from the body. That often sends the body into a brief catatonic hibernation. How 2 days, perhaps 3, Davriel said. After that, the soul won't recognize the body as its own, and the body will have begun to decompose regardless. More water. So her parents were truly gone, dead 10 days ago and reclaimed by the bog. But her sister, Willia, lay on a slab at the priory. She hadn't been returned to the bog because she worshipped the angel. Could she be saved? And Joan, the woodcutter, little Aaron and Victor... You have to help them, she said. You are their lord. Davriel shrugged. If you don't, Takanda said, I will... I am amused to hear this threat. I will see that you never get to take another nap. You'll find that He trailed off. What? I'll travel to Thraben, Takanda said. I'll go into every church and I'll sing to them of the necromancer of the approaches. I can sing more than the warding song. I have other songs with other emotions. I'll make them hate you, terrible Lord Davriel Kane, the man who took the souls of an entire village. You wouldn't dare. I'll break down in tears, she threatened, before every would-be knight, questing hero, and hunter wanting to make a name for themselves. I'll send an endless stream of self-righteous champions to the approaches until they clog the bridges in their eagerness to come and bother you. I could just kill you, you realize, and my soul will continue, Takanda said. As a mournful ghost, the girl of the forests, whose entire family was taken by Davriel of the approaches. I'll sing ballads. Dead or alive, I'll send them to annoy you, and I'll draw them maps and pictures of your face, and... Enough, girl, Davriel said. I doubt you would have the willpower to continue this silly endeavor as a geist. Takanda bit her lip. In defiance of his words, Davriel looked worried. Annoyed, really, but it seemed, with this man, that was basically the best she could hope for. She has the power of singing Baby Shark that damages undead. Yeah. You know they'll come for you, Takanda said. Even if you kill me. An entire village? Rumors will spread. Decades from now, people will still be trying to slay you. You're probably right that I couldn't do much to inspire more. But I doubt I'd need to. Think about the inconvenience this will cause. Yet, one evening of mild work could prevent all of that. Not much effort. Just come look at the bodies of the fallen, and try to figure out what might have taken their souls. You make a strangely persuasive argument, child, he sighed. Miss Highwater, are you well? The female demon had pulled herself up off the ground, and was shaking her head, still seemingly stunned by the effects of the warding curse. Well enough, I guess, she said. The carriage. Let us visit this village. Perhaps we can find some tea they neglected to deliver. Part 2. Oh, we're done with part 1. Chapter 6, let's see. Shit. Chapter 8. Whew. Alright, so chapter 6 is not that long. But I'll leave it there for today. We'll continue with chapter 6 next week. Oh, actually, wait, no. Chapter 6 is way longer. Okay. Probably because it's the first chapter of part 2. So I will leave it there for this week. I will end it there. Thank you, everybody, so much for coming to join me. I will see you next Sunday. Same bat time, same bat channel. Ciao.